Hi there. We're waiting for everybody to log on. I am Jodi Bronchtien, and we are here today with three people that are representing wonderful estates in the Russian River Valley. And what we're going to be talking about today is not just Pinot Noir and not just wine. We're going to be talking about why place matters. It's a conversation that people have a lot. Should there be different AVAs? Does something really matter if it's one row over? We hear about this a lot as wine drinkers and collectors, but we've got some pretty compelling scientific evidence that in the Russian River Valley, there are different neighborhoods and they show up in different ways. There are different elemental materials in the soil. It's been proven. And it's actually super exciting. It's not going to branch off and be a bunch of different AVAs. It's just going to be different neighborhoods within Russian River Valley. They exist. They've been talking about it for 25 years, and it's taken this long to sort of get all the evidence together. And we have three wines and three people that are going to discuss it today. So thank you for joining us. Welcome to Benchmark. And we have three wonderful people today that we're going to be talking to. We've got Mike Sullivan from Benovia. We have Alexia Pellegrini, and she is here. There's Olivet Lane Vineyard, and then we have Nova Perrill from Foppiano Vineyards in Sebastopol. Welcome, everybody. We have been chatting about this and talking about this for about 2 weeks leading up to this event, and it's not just another benchmark seminar. You know, there's some different things going on, and what we're going to do is kind of have one of the people that has been on the ground running with this whole thing. You know, when I was researching AVAs, I sat for my master's exam recently for the quartermaster sommeliers, and I got into sort of the AVA papers, and there's lots of like passion and lifeblood in trying to, when people are saying, we are different, and you're not doing that here. You're saying, hey, we're Russian River Valley, we're one AVA, but we've got a lot of differences going on. We're not going to branch out, but it's very important to sort of talk about them. It expresses itself in different ways, actually like elementally. Mike, can you please talk about that a little bit? Can you talk about your involvement for the past 25 years? Like, this is fairly groundbreaking stuff, legitimately.
Absolutely, Jodi. Yeah, no, this is really exciting. So the Russian River AVA was founded in 1983, and it's a large AVA that's been expanded twice. You know, after its founding in 83, it was expanded twice. So it's actually about 10% of the county. It's over 100,000 acres of the 1.2 million acres in Sonoma County. And going back, 25 years, a group of winemakers with the Russian River Valley wine growers sat down and tried to tease out some of the characteristics that we thought were representative of Russian River Valley. So we started to taste some finished wines and do blind tastings and a lot of sensory analysis to basically develop an elevator pitch. This is Carnero's Quality Alliance in Oregon had been doing some things. So this was in reaction to that. We wanted to really have a very frank conversation about what are the flavors of Russian River Valley. And as we delved into the small microclimates and the different valleys and different ridges, we found out that flavors were all over the map. There was not one qualifying characteristic of Russian River Valley. So it sort of sat, we were a little frustrated, it sort of sat for a couple of years. And then we picked it back up a little over, just about 10 years ago. We started tasting young Pinot Noirs that were unadulterated, didn't have any barrel influence. And we tasted them based on their geographic region. So at that point, we had looked at 5 different neighborhoods within this large appellation. We'd looked at the Sebastopol Hills, we'd looked at Green Valley, which is also its own AVA, not a sub-AVA of Russian River, but its own AVA. We looked at the Santa Rosa Plains, which is sort of the heart, the bullseye of Russian River. We looked at the Middle Reach, which was sort of the edge of the river as it bends at Forestville and heads up towards Mendocino County. We started to taste these, and we saw some pretty dramatic differences in these young, fresh Pinot Noirs. About the same time, in about 2015, University of California, Davis came to us and asked for a set of samples of these young Pinot Noirs. And they had a new technology from Agilent that analyzed elements in the wine. So not compounds, these are basically, if you remember the elemental chart, they went through and they quantified the amount of elements. And they didn't look at all of the elements, they looked at the biologically active elements in the sample, something between 16 and 18 different biologically active elements. They quantified them, they grouped them statistically, and when they grafted them, lo and behold, they were like fingerprints on a map. They were dramatically different. And Dr. Roger Bolton, one of the principal wine scientists in the United States and certainly the world, found that this was some of the most compelling scientific evidence he had ever seen in his entire career. So we decided to repeat it a couple of years later in 2017, including another neighborhood, the Eastern Hills of the Russian River Valley. And lo and behold, after quantifying these elements and statistically grouping them and plotting them on a chart, they were, again, fingerprints on a map. So this was incredible finding for us. And it really gave wind to our sails to basically take this concept, which we're not carving up the AVA. We're not doing a Paso Robles. We're not trying to make this more complicated, but we want to explore the diversity and discover what Russian River really has to offer. And these 6 different neighborhoods are different climatically. They have different soil types and produce very different wines. So it's not a hierarchy or a classification. All of the neighborhoods are compelling and exciting and make incredible wines. It's really just a way of, it's discovering Pinot Noir from Russian River Valley. So that's sort of what this initiative has been, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
And we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but I kind of find it refreshing, because it even though the word neighborhood is heartwarming to begin with, it actually is. It means something that everybody's sticking together. It's not like, no, this is different from this. Oakville is different from Rutherford. We're going to show you how. It's not like one lane. It's not the end of the bench. Yeah, there's differences here, and they do express themselves. And I read all of the, by the way, if you're watching, you should really go to the Russian River Valley Wine Growers website. There's such great graphics. We have a map that I would love to show you. Okay, let's see. Facebook stream is working. Okay, got it. So there we go. Perfect. All right, you are in Laguna Ridge, and Laguna Ridge is that purple color that's directly in the center of this map. Is that correct, Mike?
Absolutely. So the wine that I have that we're going to be tasting today is from maybe the smallest of the neighborhoods. And it's a ridge line that starts up by the town of Forestville and works its way down to the town of Sebastopol. And it separates the Santa Rosa Plains from Green Valley. And this is essentially like the 3rd or 4th coastal ridge from the ocean. These are marine sedimentary soils that were underneath the ocean 4 or 5 million years ago. So it's sandy loam soils that we call Gold Ridge. It's pretty uniform throughout that appellation over sandstone. So very, very well drained soils. This is a very interesting area in that it's above the valley floor, but it still gets fog. It's not so high that it's above the fog. And this little narrow strip of land that produces wines that are incredibly distinctive. They have tremendous red and dark fruit characteristics. They tend to have elevated acidities. And the tannins, because of the nature of those soils, the fact that they're well drained over sandstone, they have a little firmer edge to them, and they've had a long history. Joseph Swan has been growing grapes in that neighborhood, as is Kistler, as is Mary Edwards, as is Dellinger. So it's sort of the rodeo drive of the Russian River Valley.
And also I have a winemaker boyfriend in history, and it's Andrei Teleshev. And I feel like one day when I have enough money, I'm just going to make him a statue and put it in my house with just like cigarettes. I think Andrei Teleshev is he's legendary for me. But didn't he have something to do with Laguna Ridge? He also had lots of good things to say.
He helped Joe Swan find his property at the northern edge of Laguna Ridge. So yeah, absolutely. And this wine that we're trying today is the 2018 La Pommeraie Vineyard Pinot Noir. This sits right in the middle of the AVA. It's from the Ziotoni Ranch near the town of Grayton. And for me, it has this great mix of red and dark fruits. We tend to leave a little bit of whole cluster in there to lift the acidity and give the wine some richness and mid-palate weight. I think it's very classic of Middle Reach in terms of the bright acidity and the tannins that are rounded, but definitely there's some bite to the tannin. And I find that that's very true of this neighborhood.
Well, but you know what, there is a little bit of a bite to the tannin, but not in not in a harsh way. You've got a lot of fruit there, and you're like, oh, there's good fruit, and then that tannin sort of kicks in and cleans up after itself, and it's delicious. It'd be fantastic with food as well.
I find that wines from this neighborhood age extremely well. They tend to take a few years to come out of their shell, and I've had wines from Joseph Swan back to 69 that not in the last couple of years, but certainly 25, 30-year-old wines from this neighborhood that are doing great.
Wow. On a personal note, your involvement, like you said, you started 25 years ago, and when you were talking about it, you said, we did all this stuff, and then nobody could really. There wasn't a defining characteristic of Russian River Valley. You said there was a lot of disappointment there, and
I think what it had to do was it was sensory science, and it was very subjective. So it's really hard to take something. This was a grassroots effort. This wasn't a marketing committee that came up with this. There wasn't a buy-in to classify these areas.
Which is why I think it's worked, because it is organic, because nobody's trying to get anything out of it except to sort of to figure it out. And I'm sure that when you said we're a little bit disappointed, like how wonderful that it came back around to be like, no, you guys were right. It's just in a different way. It's not the same. It is different. And how rewarding that had to be after being involved for so long to be like, it really did all work out in a sense, not the way you thought it would be, but in an even better way, essentially,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, 25 years ago, we didn't know that you could quantify that in this lifetime, you'd be able to quantify elements. So the technology sort of lends itself to passion and creativity, and helps to strengthen it and give it structure and a foundation.
Okay, so we're on this map and we're in the middle. We've got the purple area. You've got the hills there. Can you tell us in terms of elements? Like I know you described the periodic chart, but where you are in Laguna Ridge, what are some of the elements that are most prevalent there?
So these are the 16 most biologically active elements. So these would be potassium and nitrogen, and there would be. I'd have to go back to the list. They're in such minute quantities that the fact that you have more phosphorus in one sample over another sample doesn't mean it's going to have a flavor effect on the wine, but it's important in terms of, all of the wines from that neighborhood have those concentrations. Sure. So it would be great if we had, molecules that had flavor compounds where you could say, oh, because of the soil, climate, site, Pinot Noir planted there tastes more like red raspberries. It's not that type of science, but it's just as meaningful, if not more so.
Well, and that's the romance of wine, isn't it? That's the part that I think is responsible for me having a job as a sommelier, and there's lots of like little sort of infighting of like, oh, you can't taste minerality in a wine. I don't know, like, I grew up in Virginia, and a Hanover County tomato is different from other places because of why. What else would be? I mean, there's a lot of things. It could be exposition, it could be soil, it could be drainage, it could be what the farmer's doing. But legitimately, you could have a tomato sandwich in Virginia and be like, are these Hanovers? So who knows? Is that magic, or is that you have a trained palate? Or I don't know. I tend to believe in the romance a little bit. I feel like science can be romantic. I feel like there has to be a translation somewhere, and just because we can't quantify it or graph it out doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so I was very into the science of the whole thing, because it kind of was like, aha, there's a thing. There it is. I can't explain it.
Well, I think what's exciting is that, as we've looked at these neighborhoods, and as you can see on the map, that they gray from one to the next. They're not hard lines. We're not picking roads. We're not picking rivers, and these things, as we do more research, that they might expand or contract or morph, but it gives the consumer, some days you might be in the mood for Moray, and some Moray Saint Denis. Some days you might want to taste Chambolle or Gevrey Chambertin. The hope is that maybe someday a restaurant wine list would not just have Russian River Valley wines, but they would have wines from the Santa Rosa Plains. They would have wines from the Sebastopol Hills, so that if you were having a certain dish, that you could then pair, wines from Sebastopol Hills. Oh, you're going to have a steak. Well, that might be a better Sebastopol Hills wine, or whatever. But it'll give you more tools to match food and wine, and give us more tools to, to expose these unique attributes of these neighborhoods.
Well, the good news about that is that I am a wine director who is making a wine list. And I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be the first one. I'm going to take responsibility for it. And I'm going to bring your 3 wines in, and I'm actually going to put them down, and we'll pick the other 3. Maybe they'll be the ones that are happening on the 18th. And I will put them on my wine list like that with a link so that people can do the research. And I'll be the first person to do it, because you know what? The best way to like actually get the word out is to just do it. And my job is to translate. And I'm lucky enough to have at least worked in Sebastopol for a short period of time. And that's where I met Nova, and I got to see Foppiano. And living in Napa, I was like, nothing's more beautiful than Napa, except for Sonoma, which is the most gorgeous place on God's green earth. It literally, the commute was brutal. It was so beautiful. I did not care. It is absolutely such a gorgeous sense of place. And I'm glad they're sisters. Like when I worked at Press, we were only supposed to sell Napa, and we had a bunch of Sonoma in the back. And people would say, well, why do you have that? I'm like, because we're neighbors, we're sisters. It's a sister, get out of here. They're different, but the same. We're friendly. We don't have to do this. We don't have to, there's no fighting. And so I like what you say about the map, that there's no hard lines, because that is the exact opposite of AVA fights. And and they're real. And I've read through some of the stuff, and I don't envy anybody that gets involved with that. That's hard. That's hard stuff. That's like marriage and divorce and birth and death all in a document with lawyers about it. It's terrifying. And I'm glad it all worked out, but I'm also glad that this is a different way to do something and highlight sort of togetherness. Okay, this wine is delicious, and we are going to take the initiative. And by we, I mean I am. I'm going to put these wines on my list, and I'm going to put the neighborhoods down, and I'm going to write a little blurb about it, because that's what my job is. So I'm going to do my job outside of this video. Okay, this is lovely. This is like bright and aromatic. It's like rose oil and black tea and crunchy red fruit, as they say, as the Psalms like to say, but it's a true story. And the finish on this, if you notice, I've only taken 2 sips. The finish is super long, and it's driven by that acidity and those well-integrated tannins. Mike, thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Jodi.
And I obviously want to reference you throughout the whole thing as well, but I know we have 2 more wines, and we have to take questions, and there's a bunch of other things to do. So I'm going to go ahead, and we're going to go to the middle reach right now. Is that okay? Nova.
Good. Hi.
Hi. Tell us about Foppiano, because when I first started to work, I was working with Master the World, and we bottled there. And they said, okay, well, we're bottling at Foppiano. And I was like, you know what? I'm not familiar. And I started doing the research. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This place has been around for a long time. Can you kind of speak to that really quickly?
Yeah, it's funny, and thanks for having me and all that good stuff, right? The funny thing, the interesting part of this conversation, of course, is that, Foppiano is actually one of the oldest wineries in California, and it's still family owned, and it has run continuously since 1896. So we're bonded winery 312. So those of you out there who want a hint of how the bonded wine system works is every time a new winery joins the system, licensed, they're assigned a number. So these days it's, I don't know, in the high 20s or mid, I don't know, maybe it's even up to 40,000 now, I don't even know. But we were the 312th winery in the entire state. Wow. And so that puts us way back in time. And it's a very interesting concept for this conversation, is because the winery has seen a lot of these changes, the development of varietal labeling, appellation, all the laws associated with putting appellations on label. All that has, the winery has existed and weathered those storms and been a part of them. Foppiano was one of the founding members of Russian River Wine Growers, one of the founding members of Sonoma County Vintners. Wow. And in fact, Louis Foppiano had the legal responsibility, or whatever you want to call it, of actually drawing the legal boundary between Dry Creek Valley and Russian River Valley when it was first established. So it was, if you can imagine, right, you have to go to your neighbors and you have to communicate and figure out, okay, your Dry Creek, because that's an appellation that's known for more sunshine, warmer temperatures. And Russian River is not so much, known for more cooler growing, more elegant wines, perhaps. So you got to draw that line. And if you know the area at all, there's very few breaks between, as far as vineyard planting, between that area of Dry Creek, the southern portion, and Russian River itself. So it's just a brief example of how Foppiano has been involved with the Russian River itself, for it'll be 125 years this year, as a matter of fact. All estate grown grapes, right? And we're right at the northern tip of the appellation itself. So there's only really one small vineyard. A man named Greg Herrick owns and operates it, and that's about as far north as you can get. I mean, there's some off to the right. I think on that map you've shown the hills, the eastern hills. I think the yellow part getting into Chalk Hill, kind of. Those are all, that's all very relevant. But our property borders the Russian River itself. So the river, it means everything to the appellation, and that kind of goes without saying. But it's interesting to mention also because without the ocean influence, slowly the fog makes its way up through the mouth of the Russian River, up through, and those regions will see that fog earlier, therefore cool more quickly, create much different wines, and it'll affect everything from bud break to veraison, ripening time, harvest time, all that. And yeah, there's the map. So we're right basically where the word Healdsburg is. That's where we are.
Okay.
Right
Very
almost
top.
101, the highway there, the freeway crosses the river. That's essentially where our winery is.
Okay.
And so you have the lower portion, the Green Valley folks, Laguna. They'll get that fog. It'll greatly affect where we are. We will get the fog as well, but it'll also retreat more quickly. So we're the first ones to see the sunshine. And I think the consequence of that, as far as grape growing, is that we have the unique ability here at this estate. So it's 150 acres. We have the unique ability to grow Pinot Chardonnay close to the river. And then as you move away from the river, we can ripen some bigger reds like Zinfandel. We're actually most famous for Petit Syrah, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Foppiano Petit Syrah. We were the first winery to put Petit Syrah on the label, varietally labeled Petit Syrah in 1964. And so that's our main flagship wine, but we have some fantastic Pinot grapes growing by the river, and we do produce an estate and a reserve Pinot Noir. I think we're tasting the 2017. That's what I have anyways.
Yeah.
And
I think that's what we all have. So
Yeah.
Pinot Noir really 2017 is what we're trying.
Yeah. And so
how is it, like, you're the winemaker, so if you're working at a place that's known for Petit Syrah, and then like you also do Pinot Noir, that's got to be, I mean, that's unlike anything I've ever heard. You've got to literally change your whole philosophy, and like, so how do you approach that as a winemaker that's doing that in Middle Reach?
Well, it's Petit Syrah, and it's probably just a nice coincidence. Petit Syrah is not the masculine grape, I don't think, that people think. It's actually, it has a ton of color and a lot of tannin, and it's extremely age-worthy. But it's actually very delicate. It's a very thin-skinned varietal, so it's very susceptible to rot. It's a lot like Pinot in a lot of ways. In fact, there's this idea that you can really beat up Petit Syrah and extract as much as you can, but actually what I've found is that if you produce a more elegant version of the wine, punch downs, again, treating it like Pinot Noir, you'll find that you get a lot more complexity, nuanced flavors, and it's not just pure color and pure tannin. It's something that you can actually have a couple sips of, and maybe a full glass instead of just a couple sips of these big Petit Syrahs, Foothills, even Napa Valley. Some of those Petits are just a little robust, at least for my palate. So I prefer a much more elegant version, and being right here in the Russian River, we can produce that. But, getting back to the Pinot and the way the topography, the fortunate part, like I mentioned, is that as we work away from the river, we can ripen the bigger reds. That's where Petit Syrah came into the conversation. So Zinfandel, Petit Syrah, even Cabernet Sauvignon, because if you look to the northeast of us, that's essentially Alexander Valley.
Right.
If you look to the northwest, it's Dry Creek. So really, we couldn't be any luckier as far as being able to grow a wide variety of varietals in really very ideal conditions. So that's the beauty of this estate. Specifically Pinot Noir that we're talking about today is that since it's a bit warmer, as I mentioned, the fog will come up, but then it'll retreat early, 10, 11 o'clock, we'll start to see some blue sky. And I think because of that, what we produce is a wine, the fruit that comes from this vineyard anyways, will be riper.
Mm.
So whereas the lower regions, you'll have a bit higher acid content, maybe more delicate red fruit, lighter color perhaps, all good things. Where we have a density that comes from the heat that I think is very unique. So we've got darker cherry, we've got something bordering on plum. You get a little bit more of the earthy character of Pinot Noir, the density of that forest floor, almost Burgundian character, because and I attribute it to the fact that we get ample sunshine. We really don't have to worry about there's no circumstance, at least in my experience here, where we don't have enough sunshine to ripen our Pinot Noir. In fact, we're always trying to make sure we don't over ripen it. So and the concept and what it yields, it's not a consequence. What it yields is, like I mentioned, it's a riper version of Pinot Noir. It's still a modest alcohol. We try to keep all the elegance there, but it's a perfect example of where it sits, where the vineyard sits in the region based on the character.
No, you are lucky. And so that's like, not only is that, when I was talking to Alexia, she said that there's lots of sun where you are, and that in fact that your grapes ripen 2 weeks earlier than hers. And we talked about that because of like she was going to be at the end, and she's like, oh good, I'm kind of in between the two in terms of like in terms of ripening. And no, there is a lot of there's dark black cherry, but it's not overripe at all. It's like the very purest form of it, almost like dark black cherry juice. And it's more plum skin. I see what you mean about that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times when people, like when you're saying sunshine and ripe, sommeliers especially be like, oh, that wine's going to be like, they have a vision in their head. But you're right about the density. There is a density of that fruit there that's really lovely in the wine. And I didn't realize exactly why you were able to produce Pinot Noir and Chardonnay by the river, and then all the rest of them. I was like, wait, because when we were talking about having you on here, I was like, I know they're known for Petit Syrah, so I was very excited to get the Pinot Noir actually. But it's I guess it just sort of speaks to the different neighborhoods that you can ripen Cabernet and Petit Syrah, and it makes sense if Alexander Valley is to the northeast and Dry Creek's to the northwest. That makes perfect sense, And I do remember when I worked there that it would look like it was going to rain, and then like clockwork, the sky would just clear. Dramatic, but every day. And how nice that is for the grapes when it's
it does make it. I think that it's mostly what makes up the estate. Petit or a Pinot it's a Pommard clone. It does tend to have
because Dave wanted to know what clone you use. That question just came up.
Yeah,
we have very Pommard-like. What clones do you use? And high five, Dave, because Pommard is the answer. Yeah,
and it's we have several blocks with several different clones, but generally what seems to show the best in this climate seems to be the Pommard. But we're very hands off, from a winemaking standpoint. Very modest oak. I've never really loved heavy oak character. So what we use, subtle, once used barrels, very high quality kind of French barrels, but once used. just to help age the wine a bit, bring a little bit of character. But I've always found, especially with Pinot Noir, if you show if oak is something that you can taste and smell, I've never really been a huge fan of that, because that just means that given Pinot's nature of being so delicate, that just means that you're probably covering up something that wants to show. Really, you want the oak to enhance what's there as opposed to actually, being really visible. So
I think all three of these wines are. I was very excited to smell them all and be like, oh, there's I'm smelling fruit. Not this like, okay, so this has oak on it and we're going to see how that works out. They're all very like beautiful in their own way, and they don't need that. And I don't want to say any more because people are very sensitive about oak usage, but I like it when you can't tell. I feel like that's what the wine wants too. But I'm not a winemaker. That's just from a sommelier's viewpoint, which nobody cares about on this episode.
Balance. You just want balance. You want oak is a critical piece of winemaking. There's no doubt about it. But in my experience as a winemaker and wine drinker, balance seems to be more appreciated overall.
Agreed. That was a very succinct way to say that. Thank you, Nova. Thank you. Wait, you said that they've been in existence since 1896. What did they do during Prohibition? Did they do sacramental wine?
There was some sacramental wine. There was a lot of grape sales. We would grow the grapes and sell it. Famously, I have some old photos behind me you can see, but the most famous one, unfortunately, is not up there, and it's a photo of during Prohibition. Actually, a government official came up from San Francisco and told the Louis Sr., Louis J. Foppiano, who was a young man at the time, but in charge of the winery, told him that he has to dump the entire contents of the winery. So it's a very famous photo. I could probably get it actually. Let me just try and, it's on the wall on this side. So can you see it? Okay, it's hard with the glare, but.
Oh no, I've seen that picture 1,000 times in there.
Yeah, it's a pretty famous photo. You see the man with the derby hat on is the revenue agent, and all the people are sitting around, and that's wine flowing down the ditch.
No.
So he said that, unless you want to go to jail, you got to let all the wine go. So well over 100,000 gallons went down right out the door. And the fun part of the photo is that all the guys on the side have already drank as much as they can handle, and they're all passed out, drunk. And it's been published many, many times, and it's just a little historical snap of what it was like back then. Of course, if you were making wine illegally now, I think the last thing they would do is want you to pour it in the river, right? I mean,
100%. And also, I think living out there, when I was living out there, the most widely planted white grape in Napa was Riesling until like 1978 or something insane like that. Yeah. You think about if Prohibition had not happened, what old vines, what we would have, people had to pull things, and they're growing substance crops, hay, where hay and plums and almonds. Anyway, one day we'll figure that out. But it's well, I'm glad that they've been around that long, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for saying all the things. And now we're gonna go to Alexia, who's been waiting patiently. I'm so sorry. I feel like you've been just like, okay, it has to be my turn soon. Alexia,
I love the Foppiano stories. It's
the pictures there. The place is so wonderful there, and like I said, just working there every day, and Nova and his team were always working so hard, and I was like, you know what, like this needs to be highlighted. And I'm really glad to try the Pinot Noir because I've had the Petite Syrah, so it's really nice to have that. Okay, so but you know what? I'm glad you like Nova's stories, but you have a story about a family winery as well, and you have a story about a family-run wine group that's been around for a long time and that did the best with what they had and planted Pinot Noir as an experiment, essentially. Am I right there?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us about your family, tell us about the winery, and then we want to talk about Santa Rosa Plains specifically, and then your wine.
Sure. So I am fourth generation in the family business of wine. My great-grandfather started Pellegrini brand during Prohibition, 1925. He had immigrated over from Lucca in 1913. And the destination was here in Russian River, where we are now, in the Santa Rosa Plains area. I consider this to be a sister city to Lucca, and my cousins in Lucca know more people here and more families here in Russian River than I actually do. So we got through Prohibition by being grape brokers. So I could possibly find a weight tag for Foppiano grapes in Grandpa's magical suitcase that we found a few years ago. We have weight tags from Martinelli. We worked with Perducci and a bunch of other families.
Wow.
Meanwhile, also bootlegging. Our original winery license is number 4. It's still active. We always say Grandpa was probably like the second in line when they were issuing licenses. But jumping forward to Pinot Noir, so each generation has contributed their own part to the business. Great-grandpa, the bootlegger, grandfather that started our import and distribution business. And then in the 70s, when my dad was becoming of age, he had built out our French import book and had an epiphany while traveling in Beaune in his early 20s. And the family wanted to put down roots into a vineyard in this area. And with the blessing of Dr. Casamatis at UC Davis, it's considered experimental, but we think Pinot Noir is going to work. There was only small plantings that were actually in production at that point in time. So, and it's like, well, what's the white varietal that we should plant? And we're like, just do Chardonnay. There was less than 500 acres of Chardonnay in California at the time in 1975. So it turned out to be a very safe bet. And I got to pat my dad on the back for that one, because making Pinot Noir from grapes is, growing it is one thing, but then making good Pinot Noir is the other. I should go back a little bit to say, when we bought the property here, the first generation was like, why are you buying land down there? It's too cold. You can't get red varietals ripe. And they had all moved up to Dry Creek. We found what worked here. And those original vines are our original 20 acres of Pinot Noir still in the ground. It's in the bottle that we have our Olivet Lane flagship wine.
So then what year were these vines planted? So this is old vine then?
Yeah, 1975. So they are burly vines at this point. It's the magic of the Santa Rosa Plains that has allowed this to continue to produce. And then also, of course, the people that we sell grapes to, and them buying the grapes at top 1 percentile per ton. Long relationships with William Selliam, Mary Edwards, who was our winemaker for 11 years. McCrosty gets a little bit of the original Pinot Noir now as well, but there's not a lot to go around when you only get 2 tons per acre.
Wow. We were talking, I want to speak a little bit about the old vines in this wine. And like what a risk that was when your family's saying it's too cold for red, and you're like, all right, well, we gotta put something in the ground. And like for him to go to Beaune and be like, all right, this is what we're gonna do, and like just literally just watch everything rise up around you. And you did say something important, like you sell to the top 1% of people, that you're getting high prices for it because it's going into beautiful wine. But that's also for people on, the people watching on Benchmark, that's important to know. You're talking about lots of important wine labels here. And if they're buying these grapes from you, then it's a pretty safe bet that you should probably get on this and buy some, you know what I mean? William Selliam and Gary Perrill and all the things in the early 80s that you were saying. But you said something that was really important when we talked a couple of days ago. And can you tell the people that might not know they see old vines, they see, you know, every old vines written in French and old vines written here. And what does that mean? Because a lot of people don't know I know what it means.
Yeah.
But tell them why old vines are so important. You talked about a rhythm.
Yeah. Our vines are on a pretty consistent schedule year to year. And I think that their age, they just know what to do. And it's within a few days of Labor Day every year that we're starting to pick Pinot Noir. And of course, there's always environmental effects that, you know, make you think something's going to speed up or slow down, but it's like clockwork every year. Our vines, it's like, okay, it's time for veraison. It's time for, you know, it seems as though they have grown into their environment and have found their circadian rhythm with the where they are. And that's actually true with a lot of vines. I mean, when you're doing your first planting, you know, when you're getting your first crop off, you might get a couple years of like some showy grapes, and then they go into their adolescent phase and they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to do half of it this way and half of it that way and figure themselves out. And then it starts evening out around year 9 or 10. And after they get through that wonky phase of like, I'm going to do it my way. So the old vine characteristic contributes to the finish, the lingering finish, and the complexity of the final wine. And when we planted, there was no clone program. So we have Martini, 100% heirloom clones here, Martini for our Pinot Noir. So it's not known to be punchy. It's more of a perfumed and long finish.
It really is.
But going back to Santa Rosa Plains and why the vines are surviving here,
Right.
Santa Rosa Plains is, you know, it's the workhorse or the engine of the Russian River Valley. It has the largest concentration of vineyards and wineries here in Russian River, and the oldest plantings of Zinfandel that date back to 1880. Here, we have a clay loam soil, a Huchicha loam soils. There is a water table that actually on our area has been pushed up very close to we're up on a bench, but it has been pushed up under the vines. So we actually, in certain areas, the water table is only about 3 feet down.
What?
And with our rootstock selection, our original AXR1, not very phylloxera resistant, but a deep rooting rootstock, if there's a water for it to go to, it has been able to sustain through phylloxera by having those deep roots into the water table.
Oh, that's
because phylloxera does its damage in the top 9 inches of soil. And if its roots are going towards an irrigation source, those vines are going to have the most damage from phylloxera damaging the root structure. So that's why our vines are here. And that's why when we have a swale and it goes away from that, those vines at the top are a little bit more, suffering a little bit more. But I have a goal of preserving this first growth and having people to show our wines in single vineyard designates like Mary Edwards and William Selliam helps me continue to do that.
That's awesome. And you know what, I think that's important to note, because when people hear like the vines have phylloxera, yes, it would be devastating, you know, and that's the fact that, I mean, I've never heard that about AXR1. That's wonderful. I forgot that it was deep rooting. And of course, that was like UC Davis said, plant this, and people planted it, and deep rooted is to reach the water table if it could. And then when you're irrigating, you know, I've seen a lot of pictures of vines thirsty, forming, like trying to find the water table, and then irrigation starts, and then just one root just sitting right directly underneath it, because vines are like people. And if you're gonna sit on the couch and every time you ring a bell, I'm gonna bring you something, you're gonna sit on the couch and ring a bell. Same thing with vines. They're gonna conserve their energy. And so, but what I've never heard before is that the vines can have phylloxera, but it doesn't matter because the roots go down so far to reach the water table that they don't, the first 9 inches, so what? You've got 30 more feet, or depending on where you are, you said some places it's 3 feet. How great.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. And why would I? But that's fantastic to know that, like, I think people think when something has phylloxera, that's it, it's done for, but not necessarily, you know, and that's awesome. And especially old vines, like they know what to do. They're not worried about it. We got it.
And I know Mike Sullivan is in the Laguna Ridge focusing on that vineyard, but his winery is like, if I threw this pin hard enough, it could probably hit his winery.
Nice, Mike. Nice. Next time we're gonna do that. Okay, so let's talk about this wine for a second. So what, you know, somebody asked earlier, thoughts on ideal acid levels for Pinot Noir. They wanted to know all the winemakers' opinions. But I'm tasting all 3 of these, and I really hope we've got some benchmark viewers out there that are also. And if not, get them, because I know we're supposed to be focusing on, like, not focusing, we're talking about neighborhoods and how things are different. But what I love is that all 3 of these wines have this very, like, they're different levels of it, but this purity of fruit, there's a beautiful balance between acidity and tannin. Nothing is harsh, nothing is green, nothing is too cherry berry. It's literally does everything you want it to do. And honestly, I think Pinot Noir is hard to get that. And every single one of these wines has it. Like, if you watch me drink them, I'm really excited, because Pinot Noir to me, when it is good, it is transcendent. And there's a lot of it that's just like, meh, none of these are. And I didn't expect them to be, but I'm super impressed. Like, I'm really glad that I have these wines right now, because I'm going to dinner later and I'm thrilled to show them. But so tell us what you do for yours. And Olivet Lane, you said that where you are in the Santa Rosa Plains, if I'm not wrong, you're kind of elevated, right? Isn't there an Olivet bench?
Yeah. So there are some distinct areas in the Santa Rosa Plains. There's the lower level closer to the Mark West Creek, which is very even. We are actually raised up, I think about, we're at 120. Mike, where are we on the elevation scale?
We're like 150.
Okay,
So something like that.
In my phone.
Yeah.
I like how Mike's the resource. Mike.
Mike.
Like, it's interesting.
Add 10.
The Santa Rosa Plains is a series of benches and lowlands, and then there are some riverbeds and washouts through that area. So there's a lot of undulation. There's not a big slope. It's sort of rolling hills and sort of bench area. And the Olivet is right at almost the transition with Laguna Ridge. So it's it's almost before you get down to, it drops from there, it's a bench, and then it drops off, and then the Laguna Ridge starts.
Got it.
Yeah, the
So
creek
in terms of like elevage and everything you guys are doing on here, all 3 of them, I know we're supposed to be talking about neighborhoods, but in terms of these wines, which are what people, I think, how does this translate? They all have a beautiful, like, blueprint of gorgeous fruit, complexity, very balanced, great acid levels. And I know you're not supposed to say that as a somm, but for acid is brightness. Acid in wine is like salt in food. You've got to have it. And like, you don't notice it until it's not there. And then it's a disaster. It's like, if you don't salt your pasta water, forget it. You're never fixing it. You have to put it all in the trash. So can we talk about, real fast, you said that you are 2 weeks ahead, that Foppiano is 2 weeks ahead of you to harvest. How far away in terms of mileage, just so people that are listening can kind of understand the difference? Because you're like, okay, Russian River Valley, it's, you know, it's big and you've got different neighborhoods and this and that, but like, it's
The way I drive?
Yes. Yes. Mileage.
Mileage. Foppiano, Nova, do you have an idea on mileage? It's 15 minutes the way I drive. Then 15 minutes to Green Valley, which is 2 weeks behind me.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's just down the road. I mean, you know, it's funny. I can't think of how many miles it'd be. It's probably 10 miles, maybe 7. maybe 7 miles. Like if you go down one, if I got on the freeway right now and drove down and got off on, River Road or whatever, or Fulton, it would probably be about 10 minutes away, something like that. But the ripening conversation is really interesting because we were out sampling today, and we've got, it's granted, it's going to be the first crop off of a young Pinot vineyard, but it's already at 20 bricks. So
What?
it's going to be, and it's going to be earmarked for sparkling, actually. So we're going to harvest it on Monday, and ideally we would harvest it this week.
Wow.
Sparkling, but yeah. So we are really moving along more quickly than I would have thought. Actually, we have Pinot Noir that is, or Zinfandel, for example, is maybe 85% Eurasian. Petit Syrah, again, I mean, petit, right? It's funny. It's a funny varietal in a lot of ways, but it colors up really early. It'll color up the same time as Pinot Noir, but it is very gradual in its ripening. So the petit looks beautiful. It's 100% Eurasian. Pinot Noir, you can go out there and you can find plenty of clusters that are just stone cold green still. But as a whole, the Pinot is right around the corner. I think the vineyards, our vineyards that are on the other side of 101, they're going to be coming in, I think, pretty soon, maybe in the next 2 weeks.
Wow. And Mike, before we started, you said something that I've been thinking about the whole time. Can you say what it was in terms of Eurasian, where
sure.
you are, and because that's mind blowing to me.
So I know up where Nova is, the Middle Reach is sort of defined by West Side Road and East Side Road. I know there's some vineyards up on West Side Road that are about 22 bricks. And then if you go down to the Sebastopol Hills, those vineyards, there are some vineyards down there that have 0% Eurasian. I was over in Oakville today, and there are some Cabernet vineyards on the east side of Oakville that are about 80% Eurasian. So it's a bit of an odd vintage because of the drought. But I can say that within the Russian River Valley, it's not uncommon for us to have, a month difference in picking times, even at the same sugar levels.
Oh my God.
That's how varied the climate is. And the soil has a lot to do with that, the water holding capacity, soil depth, and certainly planting density. All of those other factors come into play, but there's tremendous diversity here. And that's what we're trying to get across to people is that this is not a homogeneous area. Even though it's a large appellation, there's tremendous diversity.
So wait, you just said that even within the Russian River Valley, which is large, we get it. And we're talking about the neighborhoods, that's what we're here for today, that even at the same bricks level, that wineries, there'll be a month's difference.
Yeah, there'll be
River Valley.
There'll be grapes in the eastern hills at the northern edge of the Middle Reach that will have been picked before the southern part of the appellation starts to go for through Eurasian this year. Okay.
I hope everybody sort of understands that that's insanity, because you tend to that's what we do as humans. You tend to group things. Oh, I want a Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. And that is why we're having this conversation today. And as somebody that's been in wine for a long time and lived in Napa and worked in Sonoma, that's mind-boggling to me. And it was my favorite part about living in California. I've been in Nashville 1 month. Was that exact thing. You could be in Napa and somebody would be like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead, and they would prune 2 days ahead of the vineyard that crossed the road, and watching the difference and what happened right from here to here was unbelievable to me. And, people think, oh, wine is expensive and, you just do this thing, and it's 1 bajillion decisions and you're in charge of almost nothing. Nature gives you what it gives you. You can try to ameliorate it or add on to it as much or as little as possible with a bunch of different stuff. But at the end of the day, a month difference is insane. And also with the way things are going, with drought, with, climatic conditions, with everything that's going on, with heat, with everything, it's a risky business, but my God, it's so beautiful. It really is. These wines are gorgeous. Are there any, let's see, we have a question here. All right. Oh, good, because I was going to ask this. So I have a question, and it's for everybody. Are harvest decisions for Russian River Valley Pinot made primarily based on sugar levels or physiological ripeness? And I already know what you're going to say. Go, Alexia.
Physiological ripeness is the right answer. Although, we have multiple people picking on our property, and they are picking for different reasons.
Yeah.
Not going to call anybody out on their choices, but some pick early for the high acid and then do what they're going to do in the winery. Others pick on the back end for the larger qualities of that, and might have a little de-alc at the end of it. But my philosophy is do as little of any manipulation as possible. So it's interesting to get, because with our Pinot and our Chardonnay and our new block of Pinot, that's just not even a quarter through veraison, while my old wine is like 90% right now.
Wow.
And that's just across our, I wouldn't say, we have 60 acres planted. So yeah, I have about 9 different wineries that I sell grapes to, and I keep a little log, and I know when they want to pick, and I know who's going to go first, and who's going to have me out there netting and dropping, and anyways.
Making sure that birds aren't getting it. Wow, that's crazy. Okay, Nova.
Yeah.
Sugar levels
On the
or
ripeness
physiological
question?
ripeness?
Well, yeah, I think the clearly physiological ripeness is always something that we strive for. Sugar is part of that. Sugar is a big part of that. I think that of all the characteristics of ripening fruit, sugar levels may have the most effect on the outcome of the wine as far as your personal goals as a winery or winemaker, whatever. A higher sugar is going to yield a higher alcohol wine, riper flavors, and a lower sugar fruit is going to do the opposite, right? And so it depends on so many things. The physiological, using that word is perfect. It's a perfect word that's almost unattainable, right? Because you probably have a small window when the grapes have prior to dehydrating the fruit, and prior to you stop irrigating. There's all these. There's so many variables involved. There's probably a window when the grapes are just right. They're gonna the wine you make, as long as you don't screw it up, it's gonna taste. There's no way to make it any better than this window of time, and that's the goal. And if
I
you
guess we
can
didn't, if I can
nail
interrupt
that
you for a
window,
second. I guess we didn't explain to people what physiological ripeness is. Okay, so sugar levels, that means you go in and the grapes are ripe, and you're literally looking, that's what Brix levels is. It measures sugar essentially, and this is just kind of a simple thing. And it measures sugar, and the amount of sugar translates directly into what the alcohol percentage will be for the wine. The riper the wine, the higher the alcohol percentage, right? And what does that mean? Well, you don't want it to be too high if you can help it, because that's when you put your face in a glass and it like singes your eyelashes. You don't want that either. I'm really sensitive to that. But physiological ripeness is the other things. It's, okay, you're tasting a grape and you're looking for brown seeds, right? You'll notice winemakers doing that a lot. And you're looking for lignification of the stems of the grapes, right? The jacks. And what does that mean? Well, that means if you let's say you wanted to do whole cluster to add some brightness and depth and tannin, you don't want the stems to be green because it'll be bitter and harsh. You want those to be lignified, which means brown. So that's physiological ripeness. It's not just sugar level. Okay, it's like you can have something super sweet. You could have sugar water, but you want other things in it. You want lemon juice, maybe. You want to put maybe some cilantro or jalapeno in there. So it's not just about if a grape is ripe, is it physiological? Is it ripe and ready to go for the long haul? And so that's why you're constantly looking around. So just so people kind of know what we're talking about. Okay, great.
Yeah, and it's a complex subject, and I think you could probably, it doesn't, almost these days with different winemaking styles and people getting creative, maybe it's something that's not as relevant as it used to be. But I always think, I mean, when I was learning, I didn't learn, winemaking. I didn't go to school for winemaking. I learned on the job, as it were. And what I was always taught is that, grapes, when they're in their native form, they're kind of, they're growing in the riparian area by the river. They're up in the trees, and, they're mainly, in nature, right? A bird is the one that's going to eat the grape and deposit the seed. And so when a grape is most attractive to the bird is when you should pick it, right? If it's overly sweet, it's going to have ants on it or whatever, that's very simplistic version of physiological ripeness. Like, this is the most appealing piece of fruit for the bird it has evolved together to deposit seeds. And so you're trying to find that perfect spot. And that's very elusive. And maybe that doesn't even fit the kind of wine you want to make,
But that's good, because then it gives you choices. Like you said, you're picking Pinot Noir, but it's going to be for sparkling. So you're picking it on the leaner side because you want that bright acidity.
There you go.
And that's why you need to have it. And then there's others that, like, I have people will tell me in the restaurant floor, like, I want a Pinot Noir that drinks like a cab. What? Okay, great. Or I like this kind of, this is what I like. And then you figure it out, and you look to different producers that are producing the style of wine, and there's a consumer for all of those things, which is good for everybody. Okay, Mike, what do you think? Sugar level, physiological ripeness?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And, part of it is that, it's not just a matter of sugar or, phenological ripeness is really a matter of, when, as the anthocyanins, the color molecules begin to detach from glucose and sugar rings, they become more available, and they're more accessible during the fermentation process. There are other factors in play. Sometimes you're watching the acidity of the fruit. I have some vineyards where I've got pHs that I may have sugars at 23.5, potential alcohols that are creeping up to 14, but the pH is still 3.12. So the wine is almost undrinkable. So I'm waiting for the acids to respire, and as a result, sometimes the sugars rise. Other times where the acids have respired and they're really low and the pHs are starting to creep up, and I've got to get in there before the acid's gone. So I really try from a minimal intervention standpoint. Once the grapes get into the winery, I want to capture natural acidity. I want to capture brightness and freshness in the wines. I don't want them to be green. I don't want to have I don't want tannins to be hard or rough or green. So it's always a bit of a balancing act, and every vintage is different. Some vintages are more extreme. This is one where we've had less than half of our average rainfall. So the climatic conditions are pretty, leading up to it are pretty important. And having history with the vineyard, in Alexia's case, vines were planted back in the 70s. I've got a vineyard that was planted back in 1970. And those vines they tend to ride out, wet years, dry years. They're not very productive from a yield perspective, but what they do produce is incredibly consistent and uniform.
That's awesome. Okay, so I just want to sort of wrap it up a little bit and talk about the fact that I'm really glad that we did this today. This melding of the minds between Russian River Valley wine growers and Benchmark, and the Benchmark consumers are just they're interested in what's going on. There's a lot of love for California out there. I just left. I hope you know that from Nashville. Somebody was running the water in the kitchen, and I said, "My California is up. You have got to turn this water off. I am having a panic attack." And they were like, "Oh," because they don't have to worry about that here. But there's such a love for California. There's such a love for Sonoma. There's such a love for Russian River Valley Pinot Noirs, and anything that can separate that and give us more education is, I think that's kind of what people are looking for. You can get a million different kinds of wines, but knowing differences, like you said, and I am going to do this, that Laguna Ridge is going to be, it's going to be different from Santa Rosa Plains. It's going to be different from Middle Reach. And I think we highlighted some of those differences today, but I also do want to say that what you all have in common are these wines are beautiful, beautiful. And I hope that if you're watching that you pick these wines up. So I guess in conclusion, it's very exciting. It really is for me as a sommelier and for somebody who studies that something like this has come up and that there is scientific evidence behind it. And even if we don't know how to quantify it, I love that there is a difference, because there is. I mean, Sonoma and Napa are hotbeds of geological activity. They shouldn't exist. They are literal islands in the world, all the different soil types, all the everything, and how there's so much going on geologically there. And the fact that this scientific study that UC Davis put on and then asked you for the samples is great. Like, I feel like that's so fantastic. So thank you again for watching. Thanks to Mike Sullivan from Benovia, representing Laguna Ridge, the Laguna Ridge neighborhood in Russian River Valley, and Nova Perrill from Foppiano, which is in Middle Reach, which is at the very top, and then Alexia Pellegrini from Santa Rosa Plains, talking about her family and the wines there. And this has been wonderful. I guess my time is out because my light just went off. Thank you so much. Thank you, Benchmark viewers. This has been absolutely fantastic. And I can't wait to do this again in 2 weeks. And I can't wait to put these wines on my list. I promise you guys I'm doing it. I'm putting the neighborhoods on there. And that way, when anybody has a question, I'll educate them tableside, because that's why you need sommeliers and winemakers. Thanks again, everybody. And have a great night.
Thank you, Jodi.
Happy harvest.
Thanks,
coming up.
Jodi.
Bye, guys. Thank you.